Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live, as always, from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning, and we have a lot to cover on this morning's broadcast. We're going to talk about, well, it turns out the economy's fine, so that's a good way to start out your morning. The president saying in an interview with CNN yesterday that he has turned the economy around. So we've got that going for us. Also, we're going to talk about his decision. And this, I'm just going to glance over this very quickly. We'll talk more in depth in just a little bit. But we're also going to hear about Biden vowing that we will not supply weapons for Israel's offensive attack on Hamas-controlled Rafah. So that's also coming from the Biden administration and Biden directly with that interview. Also, quite a few things here about Trump. What did you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene making the move to oust Mike Johnson? That did fail. We'll talk about that as well. A lot of immigration updates and, of course, college campus protests that have, of course, transcended college campuses and now hitting elsewhere. So we'll talk about that as well. And then later on in the program, we're going to be talking to the Gaffer district because they have Glass Fest coming up. So that'll be in the 7 o'clock hour. So make sure that you tune in for that. What else? We got all our bases covered here. First off, just a couple updates as we've been starting the show with updates. This is another fine example of why you need to know who you are voting for. And this is Monroe County District Attorney, who we talked quite a bit about, Sandra Dorley. She has been fined for this speeding that caused all this kerfuffle of her yelling at a police officer and all those excuses. She will be asked to pay $183 in connection with a traffic violation. The payment due includes a $90 fine and a $93 surcharge. Now, Webster judges opted to ask an out-of-town judge to levy the fines. Chosen was Town of Ontario Justice William Benedict II. Now, Dorley was first elected back in 2011 and won re-election last year in a contest in which she was unopposed. That's another major issue that we're dealing with. People not wanting, and this I know is a little different, DA, but not wanting to get involved. But think of those terms since 2011. Anyway, she said she will not step down. Another update. Well, this isn't even an update. I'm going to jump ahead because I've got an update in a second. I wanted to mention, because we hear and we've talked so much about list of demands, which is a trend that goes back, it goes back a long time, but you start to see these list of demands on college campuses. We saw them during these protests and protests in the past, demanding something. And it's become kind of a pet peeve. Well, migrants in Denver have submitted a list of 13 demands that they say the city must obey before they leave their packed encampment and head into shelters. Well, they're paying attention to the news. Apparently, encampments are not to be messed with by officials. The group refused to budge until their extensive list is meant as a battle with Denver Human Services. The migrants, consisting of families living under a bridge and near train tracks, issued their demands after Democratic Mayor Mike Johnston, just so we're clear here, two different stories here. Mike Johnston petitioned to have the group moved. Ooh. Let's look at their list of demands, just because I find these so fascinating. Now, on college campuses, they're and I haven't read this yet. College campuses are normally very demanding, things that can't even be obtained reasonably. This is what the group of migrants in Denver are asking before they'll pack up their encampment. 1, migrants will cook their own food with fresh, culinary appropriate ingredients provided by the city instead of pre-made meals. This is if they're going to go to this shelter. Rice, chicken, flour, oil, butter, tomatoes, onions, etc. Also, people will not be punished for bringing in and eating outside food. So they're asking for fresh food to be provided and not pre-made meals. 2, shower access will be available without time limits and can be accessed whenever. We are not in the military. We're civilians. Interesting. These are the exact quotes. 3, medical professionals visits will happen regularly, and referrals and connections for specialty care will be made as needed. So, free food, health care, water. That's interesting, though. We are not in the military. We're civilians. Interesting. 4, and that's interesting, demanding water when you're in an encampment. But anyway, this is to go into the shelter. Because it's not like you can shower at any time in an encampment, can you? 4, all will receive the same housing support that has been offered to others. They cannot kick people out in 30 days without something stable established. 5, there needs to be a clear, just process before exiting someone for any reason, including verbal, written, and final warnings. Yes, I'm going through this whole list. 6, all shelter residents will receive connection to employment support, including work permit applications for those who qualify. 7, consultations for each person and family with a free immigration lawyer must be arranged to discuss progress in their case. And then the city will provide ongoing legal support in the form of immigration document clinics and including transportation to relevant court dates. 8, the city will provide privacy for families and individuals within the shelter. 9, no more verbal or physical or mental abuse will be permitted from the staff, including no sheriff sleeping inside and monitoring 24/7. We are not criminals and won't be treated as such. 10, transportation for all children to and from their schools will be provided until they finish in 3 weeks. 11, no separating families regardless of its family members if they have children or not. The camp will stay together. 12, the city must schedule a meeting with the mayor and those directly involved in running the newcomer program ASAP to discuss further improvements and ways to support migrants. And finally, number 13 in the list of demands, the city must provide all residents with a document signed by a city official in English and Spanish. With all of these demands, that includes a number to call to report mistreatment. Now, the mayor's office also offered the migrants who have stayed on the private property in Central Park, owned by railroad company Union Pacific for several weeks, the ability to stay in a city shelter for 7 days instead of the mandated 3. That doesn't sound like enough. Last month, Mayor Mike Johnston launched the controversial Asylum Seekers Program, which accommodates new migrants staying at city-funded shelters in Denver. Isn't this interesting? We're not criminals. We are citizens. This sounds like the Denver mayor got himself into quite a mess. just a different kind of list of demands. No commentary, just something to bring to you from the state of Denver. All right, now an update. I know we had a viewer bring this to our attention a couple of weeks ago. We've got a lot going on in New York State, a lot of struggles. The mass exodus that we talk about so often. As a matter of fact, and I'm going to promote this later on, this is a good time or a good opportunity to bring up our website, Big Fox's website, because I have a guest column from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, and it's called My Take on the 2024-2025 State Budget. You can go to wydc-tv.com to check out that article. You'll also notice here that we have quite a few articles up. We have a clip from yesterday's interview with Congressman Nick Langworthy. Hey, there's Shades. The Kentucky Derby predictions, our tributes to Dwayne Eddy, Joe Semplinski. So that's at wydc-tv.com. And check out that guest column from Phil Palmisano. So we know, because we've had him on numerous times, specifically around the budget season, and we know about the struggles in New York State. And luckily, some people have taken up what we all stress about, what we are all losing sleep about. End of the single cheese slices? A bill prompts debate on plastic packaging. Isn't it nice to know that Albany is looking out for us? Assembly lawmakers are advancing legislation aimed at cutting down on plastic packaging as New York aims to deal with a solid waste problem. The Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act would require companies with more than $1 million in net income that sell or distribute packaging material to reduce packaging, improve recycling and recycling infrastructure, financial support, municipal recycling programs, and reduce toxins in packaging. Well, there we are. As we have said, It's nice to know that they're worried about the things that are bothering us, the residents of New York. The legislation, which has been opposed by many in the plastics industry and by Republican lawmakers, will put the responsibility of dealing with plastic waste on the producer. Ross Eisenberg, president of America's Plastic Makers, which represents companies that produce plastic products, derided the bill as too expensive and ineffective and claimed it is pushed by misguided activists. So, if you were thinking, well, I will put it this way. I would hurry up and enjoy your grilled cheese sandwiches while you can, because I see a scenario because of the nature of Albany and its virtue signaling. I see this being a very popular bill. Opponents of the bill have also pointed to reporting from the New York Post saying that the bill would ban individually wrapped cheese, while cheese slices that are completely wrapped in plastic, in addition to being wrapped in outer packaging, would face requirements to reduce packaging. The solution could be something done by many sliced cheese packages, placing strips of wax paper between the slices. Enck, the spokesperson, ENCK, said, "Let's have the cheese debate. I'm happy to have it." All right, there we go. Eisenberg said the sliced cheese debate points to a broader issue he has with the legislation. The far-reaching implications of the reduction in packaging would affect all New Yorkers. Food packaging is there to keep it safe, like raw meat and poultry, or to help food stay fresh longer, which reduces food waste, which is on the back end another major issue. So there you go. To ease your worried mind on this Thursday morning is 6:12 as you get up and ready to go to school or to work. Have no fear. Put aside that 5-year plan of maybe moving out of the state, because now Albany is dealing with single cheese slices and protecting us from ourselves, and we appreciate that. So we've got to take our first short break. Thank you for all the waves coming in. Feel free to comment at any time. We've got another update, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. We have a lot about, not a lot, actually, just a few things here about the protesters that we may start the program off with. When I say start, did you see the long knives are out for RFK Jr.? The polls must not be going the way that they had hoped. Remember, we keep hearing, I bet you it's going to hurt Trump. I bet you RFK Jr.'s campaign is going to hurt Trump. And we said, why is the New York Times concerned about that? Why are these outlets that never want to see a Republican win ever again? Why are they concerned about Trump losing support to RFK Jr.? Well, then they'll try that line for a while, and then you see their true colors come out, and you see the attacks on RFK Jr. from the same outlets that want Biden to win, now changing kind of their tune and really attacking him. And that's been a major news story this morning, because the media sees it as an opportunity to try to dissuade people from RFK Jr. and going towards Biden. We'll talk about that later on as well. But stay with us. We're just getting started here on Frankly Speaking. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning as we look at historic Marcus Street. And speaking of Marcus Street, we're going to be talking with the Gaffer District here in just a little bit about the upcoming Glass Fest, so stay tuned for that. Just one quick update before we get into college protesters. Not a lot on that today, just a few things worth mentioning. Then we're going to get into the presidential race. Kristi Noem has ended, well, it looks like anyway, her media tour with last-minute cancellations. She canceled with both Greg Gutfeld and Dana Bash. I've got to say, this has been a pretty disastrous book tour. I think she probably was smart in avoiding Greg Gutfeld. He can be hilarious and brutal. CNN's Bash announced on Wednesday that she planned on having the governor on the program, but Noem's team canceled at the last minute. Before announcing the abrupt cancellation, Bash played a highlight of some of Noem's most chaotic interviews. Gutfeld wasn't quite as kind. He said that she canceled at the last minute due to weather. Quote, "I don't believe it. I just think it's a little late to keep her on a short leash. I hoped she'd reconsider, but I'm not going to sit up and beg." Anyway, so I think that the book tour may be over, as it has not went swimmingly. New York City, I don't know if I mentioned this, gentleman, the other day, but school chancellor David Banks was defiant. And I think I saw one article, and I can't remember who posted it, but sticks it to Republicans or something to that extent. But just to show you quickly the media bias. But he was being grilled by Congress over his response to anti-Semitism, insisting that hateful incidents in New York City classrooms have been dealt with in a, quote, appropriate fashion. Tensions did flare as Banks was slammed for his decision to reassign, not fire, the principal of a Queens school where students rioted in November against a Jewish teacher who had attended a pro-Israel rally. So as we mentioned, this was going to happen on high school campuses as well as college campuses. I did not realize that happened in Queens. How can Jewish students feel safe in New York City public schools when you can't even manage to terminate the principal of, quote, open season on Jews high school? That was what it was called, said Representative Brandon Williams. Banks snapped back saying it's not open season on Jews high school. It's called Hillcrest High School. And we consider his leadership to not be strong enough in that school. What? That's a weird way of wording it. Is he strong enough to be on your payroll? Williams said. House Republican Conference Chairwoman Elise Stefanik, who is on the short list, we're being told anyway, I don't have any inside info, for Trump as a VP, also quizzed Banks on Hillcrest, noting it was very concerning that Milzgweski had been removed into the senior position of Director of Instruction when his leadership had been called into question. But Banks' response was that while the DOE has had teachers with challenges, there are also members of Congress who have made anti-Semitic statements, and I would not cast aspersions on this entire institution. Well, to his point, I don't know if that's sticking it to Republicans, because who he would be talking about are Democrat representatives, so that's interesting. I wish I would have printed out that piece, because I can't remember. I do so much show prep in the morning where that came from. Really giddy, thinking that he went after Republicans. The whole piece, I'm not going to go through the back and forth. You can read it for yourself. This is from the New York Post. But defiant that we've done everything that we can in an appropriate fashion. Well, it doesn't seem to be working. Here's an example. This is actually an upstate, though. I can't blame the New York City schools chancellor for this. But just to show you how this is trickling out, a Jewish mother was left stunned after anti-Israel protesters shut down the road near her children's upstate New York elementary school and shouted at the children, the kids, that their parents were, and I quote, complicit in genocide and, quote, baby killers. Isn't this is one of the very troubling aspects of all this. On college campuses and here out in the quote-unquote real world, that the intimidation tactic that is being used against members of the Jewish community, your heart has to go out for Jews throughout the country who are now so concerned, worried, scared for their safety, for their family safety. Here you have grown-ups yelling at children on their way to school. And this is right in Woodstock, New York. Again, isn't it interesting? I guess I can't stereotype that everybody that lives in Woodstock is a hippie or something, but isn't it interesting that it was always about love, right? Peace and love. And now it's about essentially promoting hate and anti-Semitism. Not essentially, it is. I mean, the language that is being used at these protests, the intimidation of Jews. So it went from kind of the hippies, the protesters that you kind of picture in your head, were all about love, right? Just love one another. And now it's about yelling at children and saying that their parents are complicit in genocide and baby killers. Now it's about yelling language that I could never use here on the program at Jewish students, at Jewish professors. That's that love that trumps hate that we've heard so much about. Bryce Gruber of Woodstock said she had trouble coming up with answers for her children about the things they had heard when dozens of protesters descended on their small town to target the Ametek Ratron Defense Manufacturing Company, which is based down the road from the Woodstock Elementary School. Quote, they were screaming at the kids and anyone who tried to get across or get near them. They told my kids that their parents were complicit in genocide and that they were baby killers. It's a nice thing to yell to someone about to yell to a child about their parents. that they're baby killers. Gruber, who is a mother of 5, shared her encounter with the protests on Instagram. While Gruber was in disbelief that such a demonstration broke out in her small town of about 6,000 people, what was even more concerning was that her own neighbors came out in support of it. They were cheering them on, shouting, "We love you," Gruber said. That was the worst part. Yeah, I mean, well, Woodstock, kind of an art community, we'll put it that way. But yeah, so the protests start, and what happens? You got the mob mentality like you're seeing on college campuses. You want to be fashionable in this process, so you've got to come out and support the protesters, because the fashionable thing to do now is to spew hate, is to spew anti-Semitism. So these neighbors say, "Oh, I don't want to be thought of being on the wrong side of this. Let me jump on the bandwagon and become a part of these debates at yelling at children and calling their parents baby killers." It was all really disgusting, and not a single person has reached out to our Jewish community to say something or check in afterwards. All right. One or two more quick things on this, and then we're going to move along, just because I do want to talk about on the kind of the next level to this, which is Biden saying that we're not going to send bombs and artillery to Israel if it launches a major invasion in Rafah. That's one of many very curious things that he said during that interview with CNN. So stay with us. I am running late. It's that kind of morning. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. We have a comment from a viewer. I have a solution for 2 of today's issues. We should trade Marjorie Taylor Greene for John Fetterman. I am still very cautious about John Fetterman, but I've got to say he's been doing a great job when it comes to his stance on Israel, saying yesterday, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I want them to go into Rafah, saying that these protesters are a hindrance to peace. Marjorie Taylor Greene causing a little uproar yesterday, getting booed when she put forth her motion to oust Mike Johnson. The second part to that comment: toxins have no place in our cheese slices. Toxins should stay in politics where they belong. That's true. You're welcome. You can take the rest of the day off. Perfect. I will. Thank you. No, I can't. We only have a little bit more. We only got an hour and a half left. We got some other comments. We will get to those in a little bit. Just quickly to just wrap up our discussion. I thought that the New York Post had a great editorial, or their editorial board had a great piece about Alvin Bragg and what they go through and name some of these serial protesters, these people that cause destruction. And they said, "Hey, Matt and District Attorney Alvin Bragg, how about getting serious and creative in investing, charging, and criminally prosecuting the career agitators, encouraging chaos across the city?" Again, they show the pattern, the kind of the catch and release of these serial agitators. But they finish with this: the DA's proved he can get wildly creative when it comes to charging an ex-president. He should be trying at least as hard to jail the professional protesters who keep disrupting the lives of ordinary New Yorkers. I think that I couldn't agree more. Did you see this? I know they're going to get in trouble. But have you seen the video of a contractor who was hired to cover up the anti-Israel vandalism? This was in Ohio's Case Western Reserve University. So the protesters had scrawled, would that be the right word, graffitied all this anti-Israel hate on the walls of this university. So they hired contractors to paint over it. Well, the protesters wouldn't move. So what would the contractor do? Well, I'm sure the university didn't want them to do this. They simply painted right over them, meaning the protesters, when they declined to move. The unidentified worker was filmed spraying the defiant protesters with white paint as they tried to block him from covering up their pro-Palestinian graffiti on the Cleveland campus. Yeah, he's got a job to do. You know, he's getting paid for this. The kids may be getting paid for it too, but that's another side note. So he said, "I'm going to do my job." A clip being shared wildly on social media showed the painter, who school officials described as a third-party contractor. See, that's them distancing themselves, inching closer to the demonstrators as he slowly covered up the vandalism. When the protesters refused to get out of the way and quickly donned protective face masks, the painter then hit them with the paint. CWRU President Eric Kaler ordered the cleanup after condemning what he described as, quote, threatening, intimidating, and anti-Semitic language scrawled across 2 campus walls. I strongly condemn the language posted yesterday on the advocacy wall and want to reiterate to our entire community that such language, no matter to whom it is directed, will not be tolerated on our campuses. After defacing the advocacy wall later in the evening, the protesters painted the spirit wall with language that was less threatening, but still intimidating to some in the community. In the wake of the painting saga, you guessed it, Students for Justice in Palestine decried the incident, arguing that students had been assaulted. It's interesting when you pick and choose to get outraged about student safety. They were disturbed by the footage, and that's what the dean or the president, I can't remember what his official title is, that's what he said as well. He was disturbed. Let me be clear. No student or any individuals should ever be treated this way, especially on a campus where our core values center on providing a safe, welcoming environment. I'm just going to say this, not from any bias standpoint, just for pure fun to think about. If the contractor, who will undoubtedly lose his job for taking this stance, if they set up a Kickstarter or GoFundMe page for him, how that would go. Just curious. Ilhan Omar, and you know, you're never going to hear me say that I agree with her, but she said that the protesters have won. And in many ways, she's correct, unfortunately. They've spread. There's been no real repercussions for many of the students. She said, this is what young people across the country were protesting for, and finally the needle has moved in a significant way. I hope we see more progress, but don't ever let people tell you that your voices are meaningless and your actions are worthless. The arc of what is possible is always with us to bend. And this is... I would say, and this is coming from, the reason Ilhan Omar said that they won is because Biden's comments about not supplying Israel with the weapons to invade Rafah. Biden made that announcement during that interview yesterday. So I'll pose that question to you. Do you agree or do you disagree in what Ilhan Omar says? And I'm not going to hold it against you if you say you agree with it, Ilhan Omar. But is she right? Did the protesters win? I know a lot of people are coming out and saying Joe Biden caved to the mob. He's more worried, and we talked about this with Congressman Langworthy yesterday, he's more worried about November than he is about our ally Israel and about doing what is right. He's more worried about these college campus agitators. But remember, when you see this on college campuses, he's doing everything in his power to make sure we pay for their education as well. Keep that in mind. Whatever your position is on the college campus protests, if you think they've run amok, got out of hand, if you think they're anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas, as we've seen, remember the president is doing his darndest and ignoring the Supreme Court to make sure that those students get a free education on your dime. But he's caving to them because that's an important voting block as he's hemorrhaging in other areas. We know that he started strong on Israel, and as that one piece had a comment about his stance on things, that is ever changing. That a stance, no matter how much it's in his quote unquote core belief, he'll drop it on a dime if it means more votes. There is some tough talk. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost said that pro-Hamas protesters could be prosecuted under the KKK law. And that's interesting because if you recall, I had mentioned early on during these protests that like every terroristic group, these protesters were covering their face, trying to disguise who they were as they were intimidating Jewish students. And so it's interesting that Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, who may have been listening to the program, decided this is the avenue to go down. There are similar state laws, such as a 1953 Ohio law that makes it a fourth-degree felony for 2 or more people to commit any crime together while wearing white caps, masks, or other disguises. No person shall unite with 2 or more others to commit a misdemeanor while wearing white caps, masks, and other disguises. Don't read too much into this because I'm sure it won't go very far. But under a new House GOP bill, college anti-Israel agitators could be sent to Gaza. Representative Andy Ogles from Tennessee introduced the bill alongside Representatives Randy Weber from Texas and Jeff Duncan from South Carolina. Students have abandoned their classes to harass other students and disrupt campus-wide activities, like graduation, like we've talked about. Enough is enough. That's why I introduced this legislation to send any person convicted of unlawful activity on the campus of an American university since October 7, 2023, to Gaza to complete a minimum of 6 months of community service. Ron DeSantis mocked the chanting of the UF protesters. Yeah, Florida's been good on this. He said, I wasn't there, or I wasn't here, meaning in Florida, after October 7th on this campus. I'm sure the protesters were all very upset at the fact that Hamas went into Israel communities and baked babies in ovens, raped women, and assassinated elderly people in very brutal ways. I'm sure they were very upset about that. Oh, no, they weren't? That's right. They didn't care about that. They were completely fine with those massacres happening, and they had no concern about that, making it clear that the attempts to squat at the University of Florida were going to be shut down immediately. There was an attempt to set up an encampment last week, and I know that they've seen this throughout the rest of the country where this has kind of become a common occurrence. Well, we don't do that here in the state of Florida, and so they did have an encampment, and it lasted about a few minutes. But he does raise a good point, and it's something that the media overlooks when they say pro-Palestinian. What it really is pro-Hamas. Where were the protests after October 7th? Why is it never talked about by the protesters or by those in the media that, as I had said on the program numerous times, and as Congressman Langworthy said yesterday on the program, there was a ceasefire on October 6th. They never focus on the deeds of Hamas, the terrorist attack, They focus on the phony numbers given to the media, who gobble them up, by Hamas's public relations wing. And as I said, it's spread. Gaza protest near Albany, near the capital, hopes to get lawmakers' attention. Now, enough on that, but it does tie in because we have Biden vowing that the U.S. will not supply weapons for Israel's offensive attack on Hamas. We'll talk about that when we come back. We do have a lot about the presidential race. We have guests from the Gaffer district, so stay with us. I know, we've got a lot to cover. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. A comment from a viewer with regards to Denver's problem, the newcomer program. Why can't they call these individuals what they are, illegal aliens? Well, they've made that, I know I always dissect these and not read the whole thing. They've made that a word that is kind of criticized by the media. But this is similar to calling welfare payment any of the catchphrases that don't offend those individuals who receive money for just sitting at home while taxpayers have to go to work on a daily basis to support welfare recipients. And while these individuals are at home receiving free money, Albany is worried about how processed cheese slices are packaged. I realize you're not old enough to remember real cheese slices came wrapped in a sealed package. And look how all of us older individuals turned out. I pity our children who have to deal with this ludicrous society. I do think with everything going on in New York, I know these two different issues, Denver and New York, but I just think the optics, if nothing else, from a political standpoint, the optics of a mass exodus in New York, the illegal immigration problem, all the public safety issues, and Albany is focused on another issue they can virtue signal on, which is getting rid of processed cheese slices, the plastic in between. If you're just joining us, I know that sounds like a wild story, but it's very true. So Biden says he will not provide weapons for Israel's offensive attack on Rafah. I made clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gotten into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. It's a weird way of putting that. Is this one of those don't situations? Remember, that I guess is a catchphrase of President Biden. The problem is when he says don't. You know what I tell Iran? Don't. They do. So you may want to find a different way of projecting your toughness, Mr. President. But civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. It's just wrong. We're not gonna supply the weapons and artillery shells used. I made it clear to Netanyahu and the war cabinet They're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go into these population centers. Now, and we'll talk more about this, but I've got to mention this before we go to a break because we do have my nose itches, sorry. We do have a break coming up because I'm running so long this morning. And we are going to get to presidential issues. We've got a lot to talk about this morning. So don't worry. I know we're just tying this all in kind of quickly. But on Sunday, was it Sunday? Yes. Netanyahu kind of spoke to this on Sunday, not knowing what, of course, the president was going to say, but I'm assuming having an idea of what he was going to say. He said, this is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone. 80 years ago in the Holocaust, the Jewish people were totally defenseless against those who saw our destruction. No nation came to our aid. Today, we again face enemies bent on our destruction. I say to the leaders of the world, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself. We will defeat our genocidal enemies. Never again is now. I'm telling you, I know. Oh, I'll post a question to you because I know there's a lot that would maybe disagree with me. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is the right leader for the right time. I think Israel needed, especially during October 7th and beyond, needed someone like Benjamin Netanyahu who is not caving and looking at polls and like that as we're seeing with our president. What a powerful message from Benjamin Netanyahu. And I like how he says the genocidal enemies, because it is interesting to me, again, from a party that preaches love, that they talk about genocide in Gaza and they don't protest the genocidal terrorists of Hamas. The anti-Semitism is so in your face at this point, but that's, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's just very tough to look at this hypocrisy when we get lectured about they being the party of love and peace. Now, the GOP is accusing Biden of withholding arms from Israel for, quote, personal political gain. There's absolutely no doubt. We're going to get to a couple of those comments in a moment. Stay with us. Another short break. We'll be right back. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. We have a lot to get to, so bear with me if I move a little fast here. One of the things that the president said during his interview about not providing arms to Israel is during that answer, he said, I said to Bibi, meaning Benjamin Netanyahu, don't make the same mistake we made in America. We wanted to get bin Laden. We'll help you get Sinwar. It made sense to get bin Laden. It made no sense to try and unify Afghanistan. It made no sense, in my view, to engage in thinking that in Iraq they had a nuclear weapon. Isn't it interesting that he says it made sense to get bin Laden when it's been reported that he is the only person that did not want to take out Osama bin Laden in the war room? Remember that? Going again to that point that he's on the wrong side of history when it comes to foreign policy. No, not just foreign policy, but foreign policy. He then was asked about the college campus protests, and he said there's a legitimate right to free speech and protest. There's a legitimate right to do that, and they have a right to do that. I love that everybody, and this is on both sides. This is not just Democrats. On both sides, always have the disclaimer. I think we all agree that we're pretty cool with free speech and protest at this point. It's about what this has become. But they have to have the disclaimer. Okay. But there's not a I wonder if this is an exact quote, but there's not a legitimate right to use hate speech. This is coming from CNN, so that's maybe just a typo, but there's not a legitimate right to threaten Jewish students. There's not a legitimate right to block people's access to class. That's against the law. Yeah, man, he talked about so much in this interview that we're going to get to later on. Just real quickly, and then we're moving away from this. Some GOP representatives came out and highlighted this for what it is, not providing arms to Israel. Leader McConnell said the Biden administration says their commitment to Israel is ironclad. If they mean it, then it's time to stop bending to pressure from campus communists and give our ally the time, space, and support it needs to destroy the terrorists that are threatening Israelis and Palestinians. Tom Cotton said, Biden says he wants Israel to be more careful and precise, but he's withholding precision-guided munition that would reduce civilian casualties. The truth is, Biden wants Hamas to remain in power. That's Senator Tom Cotton. Elise Stefanik, again, from New York, who may be on the short list for VP, said Joe Biden is withholding aid from Israel, giving Iran and its proxies the green light to escalate attacks against our ally. He has also held back munitions that would more directly target Hamas while limiting collateral damage. The Biden administration and Joe Biden himself have failed to support Israel. They're more concerned about their pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. Ted Cruz said the Biden administration is widely anti-Israel and pro-Hamas. Nobody should be shocked that the Biden administration wants to cancel student debt for pro-Hamas protesters. They are counting on their vote come November. And Corey Mills made a good point. Hey, Joe, you can't be pro-terrorist and pro-Israel. We're going to move along from that topic, but feel free to weigh in on that or any topic that you'd like to discuss. We're going to talk more about his interview with CNN. Looking ahead to November, Biden voiced little concern about his re-election prospects during the CNN interview. But he warned Trump was unlikely to accept the results of the election if he loses. I promise you he won't, which is dangerous. Asked what his former boss, Barack Obama, told him, he said, keep doing what you're doing, is what he told me. I think I'm feeling good about the trajectory of the campaign. And you know, as well as I do, most people don't really focus and make up their minds until fall. There's a lot going on, and we'll see what happens. I do think it's going to be interesting, by the way, this summer, if the protests continue, which I don't imagine a scenario where they won't, especially now, even whatever happens at the end of the day when Rafah and like that, I still believe once there's that beginning of protest, a lot of, especially the young people, want to continue that protest no matter how much things change. So I do believe there's going to be some issues at the DNC. You've heard me say that before. But we're going to talk about something that I think will ease your worried mind, much like the Albany dealing with individual cheese slices and their packaging. What will now ease your mind is if you're going grocery shopping today, or maybe some point this week, it turns out the economy is great, and that thanks to President Biden, things have really turned around from those, years of peace and prosperity during the Trump administration. I don't know. I know there's that nostalgic factor that they keep talking about, nostalgia factor. I just want you to think about, costs, things that you wanted to buy, maybe housing, boom, 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 all those type of things. And also think about what it looked like throughout the world during the Trump administration. And then fast forward to today. Fresh in your memory. How do you feel? Well, you can weigh in on it, and I'll read comments if you want. Right after this break, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. And we are back, wrapping up our number one of Frankly Speaking, as you just saw the ad, because we are now 2 hours long. So Biden claims, and then this is, okay, so he claims he turned the economy around. It's one of those things, and he almost said it in this way, never mind what you're experiencing, I fixed it. Biden then made the whopper, to put it politely. Now, if this were former President Trump making this claim, they would call it the biggest scandal in history when he was president. They'd say he's lying. They do fact checks galore. But with Biden, he claimed inflation was 9% when he came into office. Do you know what inflation actually was when he came into office? 1.4%. President Biden claimed yesterday that voters were wrong to blame him for high inflation because it was, quote, 9% when I came to office, when in fact it was actually just 1.4%. No president has had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%, he reiterated in a very rare interview. And it was actually on CNN. The 81-year-old president defended his economic policy after Burnett pressed him on the fact that, quote, voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. Biden insisted ahead of his November rematch against Trump that he had, quote, already turned around the economy, despite persistently high inflation and interest rates. Again, don't you wish the media would push back sometimes, as they would if it were Trump or any Republican for that matter? Push back and say, no, Mr. President, it was actually 1.4%. But of course, got to let him get away with a little bit, because at the end of the day, they want him to succeed in November. So he turned around the economy. It's good to know. Inflation crept up shortly after Biden took office before surging to rates unseen since the early 1980s, peaking at an annual rate of 9.1% in June of 2022, 17 months after he took office. Inflation has remained stubbornly high at an annual rate of 3.5% as of March. It's because we're printing money. The president and Democrats have voted for so much spending that it's effectively watered down the dollar. But anyway, since Biden took office, the average prices of goods and services have increased 19%. Do I have time? Yeah. So Aaron Burnett says, voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls, and part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the U.S. is double what it was. When you look at the monthly cost just before the pandemic, real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week fell short of expectation. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is a near 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're going to run out of time to turn that around? And that's when Biden said, and I quote, "We've already turned it around." Look at the University of Michigan survey. Is that a common poll? I mean, I'm not knocking the poll. I just don't see too many people quoting the University of Michigan survey. 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation is not in good shape. They're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. It's a polling data. It's just like it's your pocketbook that's wrong as you go to the grocery store. Believe what they're saying. Don't believe your lying eyes. Then he blamed corporate greed and shrinkflation. I know they understand this. They're hoping to dupe you, but shrinkflation just shows you how bad his inflation is under this administration. Because shrinkflation is just you're getting less and the product packaging may be the same as before and all that, and you're paying more. That is inflation. That is what we're talking about, these costs. So for the president to keep highlighting that as some way to say, oh, it's not my fault, it's this corporate greed when it comes to inflation. And then he had to do the old political line about, I understand there's pain. Grocery prices are up 30%. Oh, I'm out of time. We'll talk more about this at the top of the hour. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. And we'll return after this short break. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking. I welcome you. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Quick announcement, if you were not tuned in the last hour, coming up in a little bit, we'll hear from the Gaffer district about the upcoming Glass Fest. That's a part of our Steuben Senior Services Fund interview section of the program. We were talking about the assurance from President Biden that he turned around the economy. I would say if you love Trump, hate Trump, whatever, I just want you to picture in your mind what your financial situation and what the world's situation looked like when he was president as compared to today. And let me know at the number on the bottom of your screen how you feel it has changed, or if it's for the better or for the worse. But he said, yes, everything's fine. He's turning around. He misled. How about that? I'll be polite. Misled, claiming that inflation was 9% when he came into office, when it was actually just 1.4%. Grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30% since the beginning of the pandemic. And people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time, really, in the last 30 years. That's a real day-to-day pain the people feel. That's what Burnett said. That's when President Biden had to do the political answer. It's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion, Senator Casey of Pennsylvania talked about shrink inflation. For example, Snickers bars, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. It's corporate greed, and we've got to deal with it. No, it's the cost. This is what's amazing. When he talks about the shrinkflation, he thinks it distracts from inflation, but all it is a symbol of inflation. He's again, and it goes to show you what he thinks of the American people. He's hoping to dupe what he believes is an ignorant populist. It is amazing to me. The pro-Trump super PAC, MAGA, Inc., responded to the interview with a press release saying that, quote, Joe Biden was confronted with the poor state of Bidenomics during a CNN interview Wednesday and was asked if he's running out of time to improve the economy. Biden lied and said, we've already turned it around. So, yes, they've already turned it around, according to President Biden. How do you feel? Is the economy turned around? I would love to hear from you. But now you know the media's got to come out and defend him, and there's a couple different ways they're doing this. This is the first one that caught my eye this morning. Is the economy as bad as Americans think? Now, we've had these stories over and over again where, to kind of throw cover for the president, they'll say, never mind what you're feeling. I know we've talked about this a lot, but never mind what you're feeling. The numbers are actually really good. Well, this person, what's their name? John Van Rennie. He says he's a professor at the London School of Economics. Anyway, he basically calls it a hangover from the rise of inflation which followed the pandemic. So he says you're just thinking it's really bad out there because you have memories of when the pandemic ended. That's actually really good right now. You just can't accept it because it was bad for a while. Prices are coming down, but that increase is still fresh in people's memories. Governments all over the world are being punished for that bad experience, and I think that's part of what's happening in the U.S. It's ironic because compared to other advanced countries, the U.S. is doing fantastically well in terms of growth. So again, I guess I have to admit my ignorance here because I too have went to the grocery store like you and gotten gas and needed to buy certain purchase certain items, I should say. And boy, it sure seemed to affect my bank account and what I had in my wallet more than I remember. But I guess it's just really bad memories from a different time. Why my bank account is draining and hemorrhaging. I guess that's what it all boils down to. So rest assured, to start your morning off, if you're just joining us, things are hunky-dory and there's no reason to be concerned. But there is reason to be concerned if you were thinking of voting for RFK Jr. That's what the media is now pushing, because at one time, and I don't like this topic for an early morning show, but there was, according to the New York Times, an issue that a worm got into his brain and took out, I don't want to get too graphic, got a little of the brain out, I guess, ate a little bit of it. Sorry, apologize. And I saw this, and I don't really care. Listen, I'm not going to vote for RFK Jr.'s, but it's interesting to me to watch the media tell us every once in a while. It's not always. It goes in phases that, oh, he's taking away numbers from Trump. Oh, you guys are in for some trouble. And you go, wait a minute. Why are you warning us? Why are you telling us what to do? You don't want to see Trump win. And then when the polls can no longer deny that it's taking away from Biden, that's when they start coming out with the long knives. And you have, other Kennedy family members calling him bad and horrible. I would have just never imagined a day when the media would attack a Kennedy like this. So now they're going after his mental health, which I do think he gave kind of a clever response to that. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, but his campaign said it that it's very laughable that you would question my mental stability with the other options. So again, I'm not going to go into details. That's as many details as I'm going with, but this has been all over the news. The attacks on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So again, this to me is a gigantic red flag. And by the way, it's kind of interesting the New York Times that attacks Biden recently is now coming to his defense, and it is all over the media because it's a way to protect the former president. RFK Jr. says doctors... why do I keep saying I'm not going to mention what happened? But yeah, I was surprised how much cover this got. And that's when I realized it was a red flag. I'm sorry. I got distracted there. It was a red flag showing us that they are really concerned that he's taking away votes from the Biden camp. Okay. So weigh in on these issues and any other issues you would like to talk about. I do want to highlight again, I know I mentioned this, a couple quick things because we have a second to breathe before we take the first break of the second hour, because we do have guests coming in from the Gaffer district. We do have a lot to talk about here with Trump. We haven't even mentioned Mike Johnson yet. Mike Johnson, of course, as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to oust him yesterday. Did not work, was not successful. But I would love to hear your opinion on it because I know there's a lot of different a lot of different moving pieces here. We have some people on this program that support Marjorie Taylor Greene and see that she is she doesn't back down. And so do you agree with her decision yesterday? Do you agree with the Republicans that voted for Mike Johnson? Because some are saying, well, wait a minute. They need Democrats with this. What? I stand on the side that I didn't want Mike Johnson out. Not before an election. I think I made that pretty clear. So I don't know if that, I'm just putting that caveat out there, but I would love to hear what you think about that decision by Marjorie Taylor Greene, or the decision made by the Republicans that supported him or didn't support him, meaning Mike Johnson. Okay, when we come back, a lot more, but a couple of quick announcements. First of all, I know I've mentioned this throughout the week, but I wanted to highlight the Glass City Chorus presenting Celebrate the 60s and More. That's coming up this Saturday at 7 p.m. at the Corning High School Theater. This is going to be a fun time. First of all, the 60s music is wonderful, and so you have a fun time to relax at the Corning High School Theater. It features the Mad Hatton and the group Goldilocks and the Three Berries, and Accordingly Noted. So that's coming up this weekend. Also, I mentioned this in the 6 o'clock hour. If you've not been to our website yet, there's a guest article, a guest column by Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. He put out a piece called My Take on the 2024 and 2025 state budget. I was trying to think of where the button was for this. There's the article up on Big Fox's website. It's wydc-tv.com. So wydc-tv.com. And as you will see, once you find the Frankly Speaking tab, you've got the article out by the Assemblyman. We've got a clip from yesterday's interview with Langworthy. Some of our past interviews are tribute to Dwayne Eddy. So I'd highly recommend you go to wydc-tv.com and check out the Assemblyman's new article, new guest column. All right, we got to take our first break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We'll be hearing from the Gaffer District here in just a little bit about Glass Fest during our Stu Benz Senior Services Fund interview. So Barron Trump is going to step into political arena. Now, this is a little bit troubling. I think it's great on one side, but this gives the media the opportunity to go after him. You recall on his 18th birthday, I believe it was NBC News, a former NBC News executive, saying he's no longer off limits. He's fair game. So Barron Trump is going to be a Florida delegate to the GOP National Convention. Soon to be high school graduate, Barron Trump, 18, has been selected to serve as a Florida delegate to the Republican National Convention. It's taking place in Milwaukee, if you're not aware. Barron will join three of his other siblings, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and the former president's youngest daughter, Tiffany, who are also among the 41 at-large delegates from the Sunshine State. We are fortunate to have a great group of grassroots leaders, elected officials, and members of the Trump family working together as part of the Florida delegation to the 2024 Republican National Convention. Again, I think it's great. I think it's a special moment that he gets to do that. And I don't know what his ambitions are. Maybe he wants to go in that direction of politics, something like that. But this is when it's fair game to the media, unfortunately. It's already been a little bit. You've seen some nasty, despicable things said about Barron throughout the years. But now it makes the mainstream media, it gives them an opportunity to say, well, children are no longer off limits. Your kids are no longer off limits. The Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom tells us a little bit about Barron Trump, saying he's 18, uses his charm to schmooze conservatives, gets into mischief with friends, well, he's 18, and has his own political aspirations. Well, there you go. Sources tell us, this is the Daily Mail, so take it with a grain of salt, the strapping 6'17", yeah, he looked tall, I didn't know he was 6'7", my goodness, who has never uttered a word in public, is nonetheless a steadfast supporter of the Trump 2024 campaign behind the scenes. Yeah, it's his father. You kind of hope so. And perhaps more ominously, for the former president's Democratic opponents. He's also expressed an interest in following in his 77-year-old father's footsteps. According to an insider that told the Daily Mail, quote, Barron is handsome, tall, taller even than his father, and very knowledgeable for someone his age. He's also far more politically interested than people realize. I see all the attributes of a future president if he has the appetite for it, and why not? He has the Trump genes. Now, Biden has gotten himself into a little mischief with friends at Mar-a-Lago. He was recently involved in a minor accident in which a golf cart clattered into a Secret Service kiosk, a source revealed. Wow, that is mischief. Imagine if you were 18 years old and you had free reign of Mar-a-Lago. I think that would probably be the least of anybody's problem, bumping into a Secret Service kiosk. Barron, who turned 18 in March, is said to be increasingly comfortable with the idea of taking on a more visible role like his older siblings, Ivanka, Donald Jr., Eric, and Tiffany. Well, Ivanka's kind of stepped out of that political role. Melania is also ready to give her son more space to be his own man, according to the sources for the Daily Mail, though she'll continue to hawkishly guard his interests as her husband bids for the presidency and battles on multiple legal fronts. Yeah, I'm just... And I guess he's even been like hobnobbing with some big conservative leaders. That's really cool. I'm just concerned about what the media will do with this. If you recall back in the day, do you remember when Rosie O'Donnell started to suggest that despicably make some diagnosis of saying, is Barron Trump autistic? If so, what an amazing opportunity to bring attention to the autism epidemic. She then later apologized for it. But this is the kind of thing that will start to permeate now that he's getting involved. This gives the media the opportunity. So just take that for whatever it's worth. We're going to talk a little bit more about Trump. I know I didn't mention this, and I'll probably take some flack. In Indiana, Nikki Haley did receive, was it Indiana? Yeah, did receive 21.7% of the primary vote. So now the articles, and this gives the media an opportunity, the articles are Donald Trump has a GOP base problem. I know I've posed this question numerous times on the program. Do you believe if you're a Republican, maybe you are one of these people, you're a Republican that voted for Nikki Haley because you want to go back to kind of the politics of the day type candidate, okay, how politics always was. And you don't like Trump's style. Okay. At the end of the day, when the smoke clears and it's November, and you're going to pull that lever or circle that circle, if you're going to fill in that circle, if you sit there and think, what was it like during the Trump presidency and what was it like during the Biden presidency? Who am I going to go vote for? I wanted Nikki Haley. But who am I, at the end of the day, going to vote for? Will those Nikki Haley primary voters, I don't see them going RFK Jr., I don't see them going Cornel West. So do they say, I'm going Biden? Now, there is that idea, and I'm not the first one to say it. This is proven. Nikki Haley even campaigned towards it. There were a lot of Democrat and leftist type independents. I don't mean left, far left, but I'm saying, not quite moderate. And then there were moderates. The Democrats, I get they're going to vote for Biden. But if you are, in your heart of hearts, a Republican, can you say, just because of some tweets and because of some brash things the former president has said, will you not support the Republican over the Democrat? I pose that question to you. If you are one of those Nikki Haley people, and if you're not one of the Nikki Haley people, what do you think? Do you think that they'll come around to Trump? Because now it's Donald Trump has a GOP base problem. All right, that's coming from Newsweek. Donald Trump's dominance in the Republican primaries is still being hampered by Nikki Haley's ongoing and potentially significant support. Now, we know on the other side, there's the counter kind of protest with Biden when you have the kind of anti-Israel sentiment of the party not voting for Biden, with big numbers there as well. But on Tuesday, the presumptive 2024 Republican candidate continued his successful primary season with a resounding victory in Indiana, winning more than 78% of the vote. However, Haley, Trump's last remaining Republican rival who dropped out of the race in March, still managed to achieve 21.7% of the vote. amounting to more than 128,000 votes. It's the latest sign that a sizable portion of the GOP's base still does not want to support the MAGA president. But that's in the primary. I'm just saying on Election Day. That's what I find interesting, what will happen on Election Day. Now, I know Democrats, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before on the program, they talk about this counter-protest to Biden, where kind of the anti-Israel groups won't vote for him. I do think there are some, especially the young people, that may not vote for him, but Democrats are pretty good of holding their noses. Look at the Bernie Sanders scenario and his supporters holding their noses and say, I don't like this, but it's still better than the alternative. If you look at Bernie Sanders, his supporters were robbed. The fix was in from the beginning for Hillary. And somehow, and I always thought it was kind of sad how easy it was for them to say, okay, yes, we were robbed. We never had a chance. We put all that energy and money into this. We never had a chance. They robbed us. They stole it from us. But I guess, what are you going to do? We'll vote for Hillary. But I wasn't a Bernie supporter, so I can't really take that. I can't really judge, but that's what happened. So they're really good about rallying around their candidates. So, all right, enough on that. We are going to talk more about the presidential race, a lot about Mike Johnson. But before that, we're going to talk to our friends from the Gaffer District about Glassfest during the Steuben's Senior Services Fund of Frankly Speaking. That's coming up right after this short break, so please stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. This is the Hesselson Studio, and joining us in the studio is our friends from the Gaffer District. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
Especially at this busy time because you're preparing for the big Glass Fest.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
You know, it's just our signature event.
I know.
Yeah. 15th year.
Yeah.
3-day weekend.
I know.
Whatever.
So nothing. What's it like as you get this close? Is it very stressful, or because you've done it for so long, you're prepared?
I wouldn't say it's stressful because we're kind of at a point where we have it down to a science.
Right.
But there are so many layers that have to come together. So
Right.
we are very busy bees in the hive, you might say.
Of course. And you've got to figure at this point, if you're not ready, will you ever be ready?
It's kind of it,
Unfortunately, right.
Kristen actually oversees a project management software,
Okay.
and we try to put every possible detail in there.
Okay.
So that we can always look back on those paw prints to make sure that we're not missing anything. And we've added so many new pieces for this 15th year that adds a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, I'm sure. I can't believe it's the 15th year.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Not
amazing.
to her horn, but this the Glassfest was Colleen's idea.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No.
A bunch of people working together.
You got to thank a lot of people. One of those scenarios. Of course.
Actually, it was Rob Cassetti from the Museum of Glass. It was his wish, and he came to myself and Chris Sharkey at the time. She was our board chair, and said, "So, would you?"
Yeah.
And Colleen was crazy enough to say,
"Oh
yeah, we're all in."
Yes.
And here we are 15 years
I knew
later.
she was in the beginning.
Now, I think everybody's favorite, there's so many favorites, but I know I really look forward to the kickoff of the event with the glass ribbon cutting because that makes it so unique and so special to me.
It really does, and thank you for saying that. Even though we've had 14 glass ribbon cuttings,
Right.
this year, as Chris was saying earlier, it's going to be in Centerway Square
Yeah.
this year.
That's
and that's kind of special, I think.
I agree.
You know, and our sister city in Ukraine is going to be with us for the glass ribbon cutting.
How appropriate.
Yeah, that's very
Makes it very special.
It really does.
And you mentioned it's the 15th year. What's new this year? Because you're always trying to change a little bit or add new features to it. What's new this year?
Well, I'm going to turn that one over to Kristen because it was her ingenious idea in grant writing that made it possible.
Yeah, so I will start out by saying thank you to the Community Foundation and the Arts of the Southern Finger Lakes because they are the funders of a really cool activity that we're going to have in the block that's closest to Wegmans. We call it Block 5, but it's in between Bridge Street and Walnut. On Saturday, we'll have a Native American educational, make and take, interactive entertainment kind of, the whole block will be dedicated to that.
Oh, wow.
And so we'll have story time, We'll have like kids can go in and make little things. There's going to be talks about sports and how sports were important to them, specifically lacrosse, of course. And like I said, there will be singing, dancing. It's going to be a really cool thing. And then just to make it even neater is the Rockwell is having some really cool programming that day as well. So we're going to kind of let people know each other, share a little bit of the responsibility of letting people know what's happening. So if they're going to one, maybe they'll come to the other.
Right.
And it, like I said, it's a really cool thing because it's not something that we could have normally just, hey, let's just add this because, it's an investment.
Of course.
So that was great to get some funding from the community for that.
And I think that's what makes the Glass Fest so special. There's a lot of reasons, of course, but there is something for all ages and all interests. Doesn't it seem?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, because there's eating and
Right. So,
and music.
so how bad could it be? And music. I'm glad you mentioned that. I can't believe how many of my friends, maybe it's just because of the year they came out, how many friends knew about Everclear coming to the area before I did. This is big news.
It really is. And, a shout out to Marshall Ferrari, our events manager. He is a rock star. Had to say that. Because he has really brought in some incredible talent.
Yeah.
As you know, we had Fuel last year, Everclear this year, Graham Barham this year, and PA Line. I mean, that's a big deal, and it's free.
That's the big difference.
That really is, Frank, and that's something we have worked so hard to continue thanks to incredible sponsors. And if you don't mind, I'm going to name
Please
them.
do.
Shimon Canal Trust Company, Simmons Rockwell, Corning, the Museum of Glass, and we have others joining this year for the first time.
Of course.
It's so important for us to be able to keep the activities of this event free, so the money that our visitors spend is in our small businesses and our vendors.
That's an amazing goal. And when you look at the music and the quality of music you've got, and you've also have it throughout the street, there's musicians.
Yeah.
So it really is, again, fun for everyone, and it's free. You can't beat that, and especially at the beginning of essentially summer when people have cabin fever, they want to leave their house. What a perfect event.
Yep. And rain or shine. That too is a big deal because I don't know if you've noticed, but the weather can be a little unpredictable around here. And the fact that we can actually say with great confidence, this is the biggest and best Glass Fest yet. So if it's your first time, it's gonna rock your world.
Oh, yeah.
But if you've been every year for the past 14 years, you literally are going to be thrilled because this street is going to be packed.
It sure is.
Well, I think what are over 110 vendors and businesses on the street.
That's the largest we've ever had for Glass Fest.
Yeah.
And any event.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is amazing. If you can't enjoy yourself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's on you at that point.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there's so many vendors, so much activity. What should people know about parking?
Parking, we have a lot of parking. We have a lot of perimeter parking.
Okay.
We have a parking map on gafferdistrict.com, so if you aren't familiar, you can kind of get an idea. We also have a parking garage, and there is access during the event. There are a lot of places to park. I would suggest if you are in need of a handicap accessible spot, you come earlier to get a spot. But there is a lot of parking.
And one thing I want to make sure that we touch on, because I think this is the most moving part of all of Glass Fest, and that's the Memorial Day salute. And I think we've been to Memorial Day parades and we've all been to events. There's something very special about this.
I really appreciate you saying that, Frank. I've been asked so many times over the years, what's my favorite part of Glass Fest? And clearly it's seeing everyone enjoy. But on Sunday, when we take time and pause and thank the fallen soldiers, especially those in our Gold Star Hometown Hero Banner program, I think it's a really important reminder that none of this happens without the incredible sacrifice of way too many people. And to be able to take that moment and pause, it's a big deal.
And I would say bring the handkerchief or the tissues.
Yeah.
It's important. It's important that we have salutes like this.
Yeah, and we have the Field of Flags that we're also continuing this year. Again, no charge for this. You come to Riverfront Park up near where their fountain usually is going, and you can fill out a card and put it on one of the flags in the field to honor a loved one who has served.
So amazing. And you kind of gave it away, but I was going to ask what your favorite part is, but that's got to be at the top of everybody's list. So we'll say second. What's your second favorite part of Glassfest?
My answer is boring, but it's always the same. I love being immersed in the crowd and watching Glassfest unfold on someone's face and seeing them. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. Seeing them love this event as much as I love this event.
Do you have a favorite?
I do, and it's much less deep. Boomer Street Tacos.
Yes, that's okay. All right. Those are the bookends. Okay. Now, I know you couldn't do this all without volunteers. And I'm sure you want to thank the volunteers that we all do. Do you still need volunteers?
Yeah, right now we have one opening, but in reality, if we could get even 3 or 4 more, it would be amazing. Because we always have a little bit of attrition as we get closer to the event. Life happens. And it's really important to us that we get enough volunteers because we're a very small team. And it's a 3-day event.
Of course.
So if we could get a little backup. And we have heard, and I'm not just saying this, we have heard from volunteers that it's a blast working our events. We try to make it fun. We try to show our appreciation with, gift cards.
Ice cream, movie theater passes,
wow.
cupcakes from Laura Bell's, all kinds of things. And if you volunteer for more than one shift, you get a T-shirt.
So how should people sign up?
They can go to, let me see, probably the phone number is the best shot right now, and ask for Ginny, 607-937-6292.
All right. I'll make sure to mention that a few more times before the event. Of course, we're talking Glassfest, Friday, May 24th through Sunday, May 26th. Just before we go, what should people know who've never been to Glassfest?
If you come and experience Glassfest, you're going to say, why did I wait so long?
Right.
Because this is epic.
Why did it take me 15 years?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I know you're busy planning, so I thank you so much for being on the show this morning. Best of luck.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. Stay with us. That. So what I was saying is thank you to our friends from the Gaffer District for joining us during the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of the program, telling us all about Glassfest. From a comment from a viewer, Nikki Haley supporters will probably not vote. That could be. We know a lot of her supporters were, and she campaigned for this, Democrats and left-leaning independents. But I wanted to mention this piece by Miranda Devine called Democrats' Kangaroo Court Against Donald Trump is Only Backfiring. For Trump haters, the Stormy Daniels trial is a fantasy come true. The former president, trapped in court like a caged lion, forced to listen to all the humiliating detail instead of being out on the campaign trail entertaining the masses. And I've got to say this. I think, and the Democrats do this a lot, they don't understand how some of the optics are on these things. It's like when they were laughing at him in 2016 and showing all of his rallies because they were just a circus. They thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And they didn't realize that the message resonated with so many in America because they're in a bubble, right? So they get giddy over something like this. They're in a bubble because of all their friends hate Trump. None of them supported Trump. So they're giddy over this trial, and they think that everybody is like-minded. But I'll continue. Their matinee idol judge, Juan Merchant, with his fetching gray colic, threatening to throw Trump in jail if he doesn't stop shaking his head. Swoon, says Miranda Devine. And somewhere they hope Melania is shedding a tear under her Gucci sunglasses. Whoopi Goldberg looked as if she was having an out-of-body rapture on ABC's The View. When the conversation turned to whether Merchant should throw Trump in jail for contempt, Sonny Hoiston said to prove a point, put him in the clink. Why not? Put him in the clink. Whoopi nearly levitated from her chair, saying, "Oh, I don't want this to sound like I'm doing wishful thinking, but which prison would be best?" Oh, cue the uproarious laughter around the table. Sonny yelled, "Rikers." Whoopi said, "I'm okay if he goes to Alcatraz. What about Guantanamo Bay?" The ladies were rocking with laughter by this stage. Oh, what could be close to Mar-a-Lago so Melania can come and visit, asked Ann Navarro. There's something quite sick and sad about this level of obsession with Trump and a desire for him to be brought low. It seems more like the passion of a spurned lover than a normal reaction to a political figure in court. The impression is compounded by their spitefulness toward Melania Trump, who you would think deserves some sisterly consideration. But out in the real world, the courtroom soap opera is an aggravation. And this is why I pose this to you. How do you see this court case? I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I would love to hear. It's worthy of a Real Housewives episode that has somehow been elevated to the gravitas of a felony trial in Manhattan Supreme Court. We've heard it all before. As a matter of fact, it happened 8 years ago. Democrats already wheeled out the scandal in 2016, and it didn't work then. Why would it work 8 years later, and why now 6 months before the election? Nobody in their right mind thinks that this is what New York's scarce prosecutorial resources should be spent on when there are people languishing in jail for lack of court time. DA Alvin Bragg should be spending his time prosecuting cop bashers and Jew-hating agitators. On pure optics, the trial looks crooked, and Trump looks strong. He comes across as serious and angry, but in control. What's more, he takes the opportunity each morning between railing against a corrupt and highly conflicted judge on social media to deliver his take on the political issues of the day to the enormous press that is hanging on his every word. Because again, just like the rallies, they think it's a circus. They think they've got him. That's why they try to throw questions that they know will get him. I had this conversation yesterday. Will get him thrown in jail. That'll make him violate that gag order. So they ask that question so they can be the hero in their bubble, the hero in their takedown or Republican bubble of the media. They'll be the Woodward and Bernstein of their generation if they get that question that sends him to jail. So they hang on his every word and broadcast his every word, and not realizing, much like with the rallies, that this benefits Trump. But I'll continue. For instance, on Wednesday, he weighed in on the anti-Jewish agitators, saying our government ought to find out who they are, where they're from, and treat them the same way as they do the J6, meaning January 6th, hostages. That's a quote from the former president. Acting Judge Merchant doesn't have a hope in the game of contempt chicken. He's playing with Trump. If he makes good on his promise to throw the former president in jail for shaking his head or muttering, and we'll say baloney, under his breath, he'd be handing Trump an electoral gift. As a matter of fact, after his 10th contempt fine, the former president posted on social media, "Give me liberty or give me death." Only Trump could turn the adversity of 88 felony charges playing out simultaneously across 2 state courts and 2 federal districts in the middle of an election campaign into a rolled out golden opportunity for free wall-to-wall media coverage. Regardless of the details, the dirty lawfare campaign against Trump is backfiring. The message Democrats are inadvertently sending to the voting public is that this guy is so strong that he will have to cheat, that they will have to cheat to beat him. And oops, that's not even working. And that's really what it's been accepted as, that it is just an attempt to try to bring him down, to humiliate him, because they don't believe they have a strong enough candidate. That's why you have Hochul and others saying, well, this is just a one and done thing. We're not going to do this to all businessmen, but this is Trump. It's okay. The more they throw at Trump without knocking him down, the less credible they look and the stronger he appears. Then you look at the polls and you see the lawfare is not hurting Trump. Even people who don't like him can recognize that a justice system so rigged that it can be weaponized against your political opponent is a threat to all of us. And that's a kind of a statement that I made on this program for a while now. On a visceral level, it stinks. In contrast to Trump, President Biden looks weaker now than at any point in his presidency. It's not just his physical frailty and cognitive deficits, although those are terrible. The fact that he now needs a slew of staffers to walk between him and the cameras to hide the feeble way he shuffles across the grass to Marine One is telling. The fact he can no longer use the big boy steps of Air Force One because he keeps tripping. Operation Hide in Biden is a bit trickier without a pandemic to use as an excuse. When he heads to his Delaware beach house this weekend, will he have staff holding towels around him to hide an old man conked out on a beach chair? Even worse. How late am I running? I'm running real late. Even worse than his age-related deficiencies in creating an aura of weakness around Biden is his indecisiveness. There was a caving on Israel, his delay in addressing the student protests and condemning anti-Semitism, his hypocritical, very fine people on both sides style rhetoric. He projects weakness when he hides away from serious questions at a serious time and does softball interviews with fawning has-beens like Howard Stern. His campaign may be waking up to the peril of a president as coward since he agreed to a rare interview with CNN Wednesday night. The Biden campaign's attempt to bully friendly media outlets behind the scenes has backfired too, judging by an interview with Semaphore last week in which the executive editor of the New York Times sent a couple of kamikaze drones into the Biden camp. Joe Kahn said that he is ignoring pressure to become an instrument of the Biden campaign and turn ourselves into Pravda. It's weak of a campaign to expect the media to do the heavy lifting for their candidates, but they become so used to it. That's why Pelosi had the audacity to call Katie Tur from MSNBC a Trump apologist because she dared ask a tough question. The Democrats get used to this from the media. If you are so incompetent that you spend a year pushing a rancid slogan like Bidenomics, which serves only to equate your candidate with inflation and lower living standards, you can expect the fourth estate to get you out of the hole. You can't expect. They tried, though. The election will be about a lot of things, but at a gut level, it will be about weak versus strong. Biden can shout and shake his fist all he likes. It doesn't make him look strong. It makes him look like Grandpa Simpson. That's Miranda Devine. I would like to hear your take on that, but we've got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. You're watching Frankly Speaking, and I really appreciate it. 5 twists that could shake up the election before November, according to Jared Gans at The Hill. Okay. I think sometimes some of this is wishful thinking, too, where they see the poll numbers for Biden, and they'll say, well, there's things that could still happen. Health concerns force Biden or Trump from the race, essentially. Biden at 81, Trump, who will be 78, are the 2 oldest, you know all this. While murmurs among commentators, about the parties choosing someone else have largely quieted down, some health event could sideline one or both candidates before November. Though it does not seem inconceivable, both candidates have emphasized their ability, you get it, fit for duty. A wider international conflict breaks out. Okay. International turmoil is already a backdrop of the presidential race with 2 major conflicts going on. And yes, you've got to go back to the thought that under Trump, to that Trump nostalgia that some have written about, that under Trump we did have peace and prosperity. Then you've got RFK Jr. or another third-party candidate gains more traction. I don't know. Cornel West could gain some traction or Jill Stein amongst the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protesters. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is at times polled just above 10%. They go through and say how things could change because 1 or 2 points could really make the difference in this race. An economy experiences a downturn or recession. Well, a downturn, huh? Well, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that because the president, during his interview with CNN yesterday, said that he's fixed the economy, that he has turned it around. So I don't think that's a viable issue that would come up. And Trump is convicted or acquitted in New York case. A twist that is most expected to come as soon as a few weeks from now is the verdict. Trump, again, I go back to what Miranda Devine said. In some ways, the optics on this, which the Democrats just don't understand because they're looking at it from the Whoopi Goldberg standpoint of, wow, could you imagine how great this is going to be? They don't, because they live in this bubble. They do not think of what this means to people out there that are saying this is wrong. As one viewer just said, can you say frivolous lawsuit? The way I look at it is this is something that is better dealt with between Mr. Trump and his wife. As I've said before, throughout history, presidents have had mistresses that have been hushed or even laughed at. Now, because it involves Mr. Trump, it's grounds for a federal trial. Democrats can't have it both ways. Yes, I mean, think of their reaction to, for instance, Bill Clinton. And then think of it now. So again, to this view's point, the precedent that this sets for the future, keep that in mind. But I do think the optics for the common everyday man and woman out there watching this, they see that it's wrong. They see that it is just a way to bring down Trump, and they don't like it. They say it's wrong. It's not good for the future of this country. It also shows how weak the Democrat candidate must be, that they have to first try to take Trump off the ballots. They tried this lawfare. They have to stack the deck. And trust me when I say the precedent has been set. So if it's successful, we got a lot more of this coming. But We got to take our last break of today's broadcast. Stay with us. All right, buckle in, because we got a lot to cover with these last few moments. First of all, the House did pass the bill to exclude illegal immigrants from the census by adding a citizenship question. That is something we talked about with Congressman Langworthy yesterday. This is so that the congressional districts aren't affected by illegal immigration. Schumer is planning to revive the bipartisan border deal. He's using this because he thinks it can put Republicans back on the defense on this. Republicans have to hone their message. This was not a good bill. They can't let the Democrats control the narrative on that it was, as they put there, bipartisan. It was great. It was not. They wanted no kind of repercussions for illegal immigration. We talked about this again yesterday with Langworthy, Congressman Langworthy. Okay, Green did move to oust Speaker Johnson. She was booed for doing so. The House did block that. I know we talked about this earlier on. The chamber voted 359 to 43 with 7 abstaining on a motion to table Green's. On a table to Green, they worded this really strange. It tabled her motion. I don't know why they worded it that way. The Republicans have voted with Green on this. Andy Biggs, Eric Burleson, Eli Crane, Warren Davidson, Paul Gozer, Thomas Massey, Alex Mooney, Barry Moore, Chip Roy, Victoria Spartz, and of course Green. So those are the ones that stood up against, for lack of a better word, Johnson. Donald Trump saying, I absolutely love Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's got spirit, she's got fight, and I believe she'll be around and on our side for a long time to come. However, right now, Republicans have to be fighting the radical left Democrats and all the damage that has been done to our country. With a majority of 1 shortly growing to 3 or 4, we're not in a position of voting on a motion to vacate. At some point, we may very well be, but this is not the time. That's coming from the former president. By the way, I hate to end on this program. Did you see, and on this part of the program, excuse me, I know I'm trying to run fast and I get all tongue twisted. Kevin McCarthy, he's not letting go of him and his feud with Matt Gaetz. He was on, what was this on? Politico. He was giving an interview on Politico where he compared Matt Gaetz to Hunter Biden. This is what McCarthy said, according to Politico. Gaetz is the Hunter Biden of the Republican Party. He's got an opponent who is pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, trained at Pensacola, went to the Naval Academy, and flew jets to defend us. While Gaetz was getting kicked out of high school, buying coke, and paying minors for, well, we won't say, but you get it. McCarthy's not pulling any punches now that he's out of Washington. That is it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to our guests from the Gaffer District. Find out more about the Glass Fest online. That is a very fun event, family-friendly. I know that you'll enjoy it if you have the opportunity to come down. And if you do, you can come see the studios. Walk by and look into the Frankly Speaking studios. Thank you for all the comments, all the waves this morning. On the program tomorrow, it's you and I. I decided no guests on Friday, though I always thank the Student Senior Services Fund for sponsoring our interviews. Tomorrow, we have so much to catch up on throughout the week because we've had so many wonderful guests that I thought we would do our best to fill those 2 hours with everything that we can pack in. So make sure you tune in starting at 6 a.m. As always, if there's something I missed, any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, you can text me after the program at that number, or you could leave me a voicemail if you are not a texter. I'd love to hear from you. And again, I hope that you'll join us tomorrow morning. Don't forget, up on our website, we do have that guest column from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano about the New York State budget. You can go to WYDC-TV.com. WYDC-TV.com. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, starting at 6 a.m. Don't miss even 1 second. I look forward to it already. Talk to you then.